More SSAS features. Up until this point, all of the information that you've been displaying in your Cube browser has been related to individual items. Well, in this nugget, we're going to talk about buckets. How to divide groups of information into various buckets so you can look at things in groups as opposed to individual members. For example, if you want to see high-ticket items or low-ticket items or something in between, you can do that. We're also going to discuss calculated members. If you want to find out what the gross profit margin is, or the percent sales of what a particular item is, you can do that. And this is where we'll also talk about MDX expressions. This stands for multi-dimensional expressions. It's simply a way to combine dimensions and find where those dimensions intersect. And then the last thing we'll talk about are creating named sets. So a named set is simply an MDX expression that has an alias attached to it. And then you can do things such as drag it over to your filtering and filter by that particular named set. Let's get started with buckets. I'm going to show you now how to create buckets of information. A bucket is simply a way of putting data into groups. For example, if I have a whole list of products and there's so many products that I can't even list them all, or it's very difficult to look through, I might want to organize those products according to their list price. Let me show you what I mean. Right now I have a pretty empty project. All I have defined is my data source, so I'm going to now create a data source view. And there's my data source right there. It's my AdventureWorks DW. And the tables that I'm interested in are my fact reseller sales, and I can add the related tables, and I'm not terribly interested in the promotion or the currency or the sales territory. I can always add these later. I'll just hit next. And here's our nice little diagram of all the tables that are involved. So now I'm going to create a cube. So I'll just say new cube, and we'll use existing tables. The measure group tables that I'm interested in is simply the fact reseller sales. And I'm only interested in, as far as measurements, I'm only interested in the sales amount. And I can uncheck some of these. I'll just check all of these except for the last one, and then hit next and finish. At this point I can go ahead and build this and then browse my cube. My deployment was complete, so I'll hit browse right here. I always hit reconnect just to make sure my data is fresh, and I'll just start dragging and dropping things onto the screen here. So the measures that I'm interested in are the sales amount, so I'll drag that onto the data part. And then the products are right here. Now in my product dimension, all I have in there is the product key. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to double click on my product right here. Here are all of the possible columns. I'm going to include in there the English product name as well as the list price. Go ahead and build this again. And then we'll look at our Cube browser. So here we have the product names. We'll just drag that onto there. And if you want to make this in the form of a currency, not a problem. Just go to your Cube definition right here and go to your measure, right click on it, go to properties, and then make sure you set the format string to a currency. I'm going to look at this through my browser again. And things look pretty nice, but notice how there are so many different products in here. One of the ways I can organize these is by list price. So if I go ahead and just right click and clear the results again, then we make sure we go to our dimension dealing with products. So right click on there, then right click on the list price right here, and it's right in here where you can scroll up and you'll see there's this thing called discretization bucket count as well as the method. So the method, if you specify automatic, SSAS is going to determine itself how to organize things. If you want to group things into equal areas, for example, if you have 100 items and you say a bucket count of 5, then you'll have 5 groups of 20. I'm going to say in here automatic. And then we'll go ahead and build this again and do something a little bit different with our browser. Make sure you double click on your Cube browser, hit your reconnect, and we're going to drag over here the list price. So you'll see that when you drag this over here that we have several different brackets. So we have 0 through 175.49, then we have this range over here, and so on. And then we can drag the sales amount. So here you can see which buckets are selling the most amount. And if you wanted to add to this cube yet another dimension, such as order date or due date, you could do that. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to double click on my time dimension, and I'll be interested here in the English month name, as well as the calendar, quarter, year, and semester. And then from here we just drag on the year, semester, quarter, month name, and if you want to change this to be a little more user-friendly, you can do that. And then the date. We'll rename that to date. If you want to build this and browse it within the dimension, not a problem. Just make sure that you always do the refreshing. And here we have the year, half years, quarters. You see how we have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the months. And then these are actually the date keys. And remember, the way we change that is we can change the name column. So I can go in here to the view, the data source view, and create a new calculated name right here. For example, we can right click on dim time and say new named calculation, and just like we did before, we'll call this simple date, and this is where we grab the month, day, and year in friendly format. And then when you are at your dimension structure right here, you can right click on this, click on properties, and if you scroll down to where the name column is, you can point to the simple date. Okay, so now when we build this, it's going to look a lot better. We'll hit our reconnect, and you'll see here that it's in human readable format. So now that we have that done, we can go back to our cube. So now we can grab, let's say, the order date right here, drag it up here, and now you can see how things are organized by the date, and you can expand that. Sometimes you want to have a column or a row contain information that's a calculated member. A calculated member is where we have a measure that's calculated. For example, I might have a sales amount minus the total product cost. That would give us our total profit margin. So the way we implement that, we need to first of all have in our measures here all of the available attributes. So in my cube designer, make sure you're on that first tab there, I'm going to right click on here and we're going to create a new measure, and the total product cost is right up here. And if you want to rename this to be a little more descriptive, for example, we might specify that this is only for resellers. You can do that. Same here with the sales amount, because remember, there is an internet sales amount and internet total product cost as well. Let's process what we have so far just to make sure everything in here is current. And so then when you click on your browser and you reconnect, you should see both of the measures here. So from that, we want to create a calculation. So we can go to this third tab, which is our calculations, and you'll notice that we've got this one member right here so far. Every time you add a calculation, it's going to continue adding to this script. So the order in which you define calculations is extremely important, because if you have one referencing another, it can't be backwards referencing. So let's go ahead and make sure that this is highlighted and click the new calculated member, and we're going to call this reseller profit margin. And the parent hierarchy is measures, and here's a little expression window. We can simply drag and drop things over here. So if I go ahead and hit this refresh right there, you'll see that I have both my measures here, and the profit margin is simply the sales minus, and you can go down to the next line for readability, sales minus the total cost. And then as far as the format string, you can say that this is in currency format. Whether or not it's visible, we'll say true. Non-empty behavior, if you pull this drop down, make sure that both of the things that you're referencing in your expression have a check mark next to it. And then for the associated measure group, we'll just say undefined. And for the display folder, you can create your own display folder. So we might say calculations. At this point, I can build this, deploy it, and look at it in my Cube browser. So you'll see here that we now have this folder called calculations, and we can look at the profit margins. And if you want to drag over the other measures as well, for example, if you actually want to see the sales as well as the total cost, you can do that. So you'll see here that the sales of about 54,000 minus the cost of about 48,000 left us with about 6,000. How do we format this to look really nice? Remember, we just go to our Cube Designer, right-click on here, go to Properties, make sure the format string says currency, and now we can build this again and browse. It looks like the name that we gave it of reseller profit margin didn't stick. Instead, it stayed with the default of calculated member. So what you can do is right-click under calculations and rename it, and that's what I've done. So you'll see that we now have this folder called calculations. You can expand that and then drag the reseller profit margin right onto the screen like that. The next thing that I'd like to do is calculate per product or by product category what the sales are compared to total sales. In other words, we can change this column right here. Instead of saying list price, we can create a hierarchy that contains the product category followed by the model and then the actual product name. So we'll have a nice little hierarchy, and then we'll have the individual sales for that particular product and then what percentage that is compared to total sales. So the way we do that is we're going to first of all create our hierarchy. If you look at our product dimension right here, we don't have enough attributes. So what we need to do is double click on our product dimension right here, and we'll go to our dimension structure, and we want to drag over the model name as well as the product line, and from there we can create a hierarchy. So we'll have the product line and then the model name underneath there and then the product name. We're getting a little warning here saying that there is no relationship between these attributes, so we can click on here and we can change that. Let's right-click on our product name, and we'll say that relates to the model name, and the model name relates to the product line. And now we can deploy this and quickly view it in the Dimension browser. Make sure you reconnect. Here are our different product lines. We can make this a little more user-friendly by changing this to more human-readable words. But let's just expand this, and you'll see here that we have subcategories right here. Let's double click on our data source view, and for our product we're just going to right click on here and we'll create a new named calculation, and we'll call this product line name. And here we're just saying, when it's M, we'll call it mountain, R for road, S for accessory, and so on. If there is something that doesn't fall into these four categories, then it will just be called components. And then we hit OK. Now, one more thing we need to do, and that is we need to bring that product line name into our dimension. So you'll see here that the product line name is sitting right here. We'll drag that over there. And then we also want to right click on our product line, click on properties, and we'll go down to the name column right there. And this is where we can have it point to the product line name. So now when we build this and browse through our different products, you'll see it's a lot more user-friendly. So you'll see here our 4 different categories. Next, we want to go to our cube designer right there. We can just right click on here, clear the results. We'll go into the third tab, which is our calculations, and this is where we want to create a new calculation. So make sure you have the last defined calculation highlighted and then click on new calculated member, and we're going to call this % total sales. And then we'll put an expression in here. Well, our expression is going to be the sales for the product. Notice how I can just put in comments here. Sales for the product divided by total sales for all products. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to put parentheses in here. That's going to be the sales for product divided by some other expression in here. Now something needs to go in here. And this is where we're getting into what we call MDX expressions. This is for multidimensional data. An MDX expression is simply where we're taking different dimensions and finding where they intersect. And so inside of our parentheses, we just have a comma-separated list of dimensions, and you'll see where they intersect. If we're wanting to find the % total sales, it's going to be the sales for the product divided by the total sales for all products. So that's why I have these parentheses right here. So the way we calculate the sales for the product, well, that's really the intersection of the current product hierarchy member and the reseller amount measure. So it doesn't really matter which order you put these in. I'm going to expand this, and here are my reseller sales. And I'll put a comma in here, and right before the comma, the other thing we want to drag over here is our product hierarchy current member. So we can just grab the product right there, go down to here, here's our hierarchy. We can just drag this hierarchy over here, and there's a built-in thing called current member. It's just real flexible. It just refers to the product that we're dealing with. It could be a product category, it could be a specific product. So there's our one intersection there, and then the other piece of information is almost identical. What we're going to do is pretty much copy this whole thing and tweak it a little bit. The only difference here is that instead of saying current member, we're going to say all, and then all again. So this refers to the total of all the products. As far as our format string, this is going to be a %. And make sure that the reseller sales amount is chosen, and then we hit OK there. Now we can go ahead and build this. We'll go to our browser now, hit reconnect, and so now we can go ahead and test this. So we'll grab our product hierarchy, drag it over here, and then we'll get our percent total sales, drag it over there. You can see how it breaks down according to the hierarchy. And once again, if you want to drag other dimensions over as well, such as the order date, you can do that if you'd like. So that pretty much wraps up our calculated members. I want to talk a little bit about named sets. If you go back to your calculation tab right there, you'll see that there's this icon there and it says new named set. A named set is simply an alias for an MDX expression. For example, you could create a named set for accessories. The way we would do that is you would click on this new named set, give it a name. I'll call this accessories, and then you drag your expression into here. So I can go to my products and I'll go to my hierarchy. I can go to my product line, and here's my accessory, and I can just drag it into there. And you'll see that we have this dot notation. Once again, this is MDX, multi-dimensional expression. So you see how it drills down dim product dot hierarchy dot product line dot, and then we have the value itself, which is S. You can also create your own display folder. So here I might just call this my named sets. At this point, I will go ahead and build this. Then when we look at this in our Cube browser, we can actually drill down by dragging it into the filter fields. So I'm just going to click on Reconnect. If you expand your dim product, scroll down a little bit, here is my named set. So if you expand that, there it is. You can take this and drag it right here. And now you can see that you're drilling down by just accessories. I want to show you yet another example of a calculation. Maybe we'll group all of the products together and have maybe 10 different buckets. Okay, so remember the way we do that is go into your product dimension. Here's our list price. You can right click on that, go to properties, and we go up to the discretization right here. Instead of 5, I want you to say 10. The other thing I'd like to do is look at our reseller dimension. You'll see that right now we only have the reseller key. Let's also add the reseller name as well as the number of employees. I'm going to just build this and deploy it. And you'll see that when we look at our different dimensions now, I'm going to product dimension and go to the browser. And I'll just hit reconnect here. And what I'm interested in is the list price. And so you'll see that we have our different buckets. One thing to note is we specified 10 buckets. However, it gave us fewer buckets. And that's because SSAS will sometimes determine that it's too many buckets. So in this case, it gave us about 8. We're going to go back into our Cube Designer, go to our Calculations tab, and make sure you select the most recently created named set or calculated member, and just click on New Named Set. And we'll call this named set High Ticket Items. As far as our expression goes, we're going to find the bucket that we're concerned with. So in this case, it's this right here. And we just drag it right in there. I'm going to go ahead and deploy it. And then we can look at our cube once again. I might decide to delete that right there and refresh. And I'm going to find this named set that I just created right here and just drag it over. So you'll see that we have mountain, road, and touring. Accessories are now gone because it looks like there are no high ticket items under accessories. If you look at your reseller dimension right here, we'll look at the dimension structure. One of the attributes is number of employees. And once again, we could divide these into buckets, maybe 5 different buckets. So the bucket with the most number of employees, we can associate a named set with that. First of all, let's make sure that we set the discretization attribute. So I'm going to right click, go to Properties, and scroll up. So here we'll put this into 5 different groups and we'll say Automatic. Let's build it. And now if we look at our browser, hit Reconnect, and we see our number of employees, here are our different buckets. So we're concerned with the number of employees that's 83 through 100 employees. Let's go into our cube, go to our calculations, make sure you have that last one highlighted, and let's create a new named set, and we'll call this High Number of EMPs Reseller. And the expression is going to be under resellers. So let's find the appropriate dimension here. There it is. Here's our number of employees. Expand that until we see this guy right here, and just drag it over. Let's build it, and now let's test it. We can just stick with what we have right here. So our data set that we're looking at is just the high ticket price items, and now let's take our high number of employees as well and drag it over here. And so now we're narrowing it down in 2 different ways. Those named sets are simply used as an alias. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Let's review what we learned in this nugget. We first of all divided our list prices into buckets. Remember that a bucket is just a way to group pieces of data. To create the bucket, you specify the discretization number and method. Usually setting it just to automatic should be fine. And then of course make sure you refresh it in your cube browser. We also created calculated members. To create that calculated member, you just need to go to the appropriate tab, that 3rd tab over, and you can simply drag and drop the various members from the left-hand side to create those MDX expressions. Be sure that you create those calculated members in the proper order. In other words, if you have one that depends on another, make sure that you do not include backwards references to those members. And then the last thing we did was create named sets, which is just an alias for an MDX expression. Once again, that MDX expression is simply an intersection of 2 or more dimensions. Well, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for